The room went silent the moment the alien huntress leaned down, pressed her fangs into his neck, and marked him as hers. Dozens of alien warriors stared in disbelief. The human just smiled politely, adjusted his tie, and asked if anyone else wanted to file their claim before the meeting continued. They told stories about humans in hushed tones. Not bedtime stories, the kind whispered across starports when the lights dimmed and the air recyclers hissed like nervous lungs. Careful, the traders would say. If a human smiles at you too politely, check the exits. So when the Karath Packlord's court received its first human guest in a century, every clawed, furred, and scaled head turned to watch him walk in. Commander Jonathan Hale didn't stride like a conqueror. He strolled, hands clasped behind his back, as if he'd just been invited to a barbecue in suburban Texas instead of a den filled with fang predators. He wore that diplomatic half-smile, the one that made aliens think he was harmless right up until they realized he wasn't. The Packlord's champion, Vara, circled him like a wolf around fresh prey. Her fur shimmered obsidian under torchlight, her amber eyes sharp. She sniffed, ears twitching, then leaned close enough that her fangs brushed the bare skin of his neck. Every alien in the chamber froze. Claiming a throat was no joke in Karath law. It was a warning, a promise, and a leash all at once. Hale didn't flinch. He tilted his head, as if indulging a curious child. Well, he drawled, voice calm as a Sunday sermon. Where I'm from, we usually start with a handshake. But hey, when in Rome. A ripple of confusion spread. The Karath didn't know Rome, but they understood the casual defiance in his tone. Vara's fangs pressed just enough to draw a bead of blood. The scent drifted into the hall. Gasps followed. To the Karath, that was submission, a mark that bound the human under her protection. To Hale? It was Tuesday. He smiled wider, eyes glinting. You sure you want to claim me, darlin'? Last time someone tried that, they ended up filing, let's just call it extensive damage reports. Vara's ears flicked back. Was it a threat? A joke? The terrifying thing about humans was that it was always both. Banter in the den. Your blood carries no fear scent, Vara murmured, circling him again. Are you broken, little human? Hale chuckled, adjusting his cuff. Ma'am, I've been broken since high school calculus. Didn't stop me from passing the exam. The hall erupted with uneasy growls and clicks. They didn't understand the reference, but they caught the tone, irreverence sharpened like a blade. The Packlord, massive and scarred, leaned forward on his throne of carved bone. Human. Do you accept her claim? Every gaze turned to Hale. 100 hunters waited for him to kneel, beg, or die. He raised an eyebrow. Claim? You make it sound like a timeshare. What am I getting in return? Dental coverage? Free parking? A few aliens blinked in bewilderment. One young Karath dared to laugh before quickly choking it down when his elders glared. Vara's growl deepened. You mock our right. Mock? Hale said, tone still pleasant. No, ma'am. I'm just pointing out, back home, anyone who puts their teeth in my neck usually buys me dinner first. The hidden edge. It wasn't bravado. Not really. Hale's mind ticked through calculations faster than the aliens could blink. Distance to the exits. Weapon placements. Guard postures. The fact that Vara had exposed her throat slightly when leaning in, tiny, instinctual, exploitable. Humans weren't fearless. They were worse, they were afraid, and they still acted anyway. And the Packlord saw it. His eyes narrowed. You speak lightly, but your kind carries shadows. Why does the galaxy whisper your name like a curse? Hale finally let the smile drop a fraction. Just enough to show teeth. Because, my lord, we don't start fights. He let the pause linger like a knife. We finish them. The silence that followed wasn't simple quiet. It was the kind of silence prey made when they finally realized the predator wasn't the one with fangs. Shifting ground. Vara stepped back, hackles raised but gaze locked on him. You dare twist my claim? Not twist, Hale said softly. Just reinterpret. See, where I'm from, if someone puts their mark on me, That means they've chosen responsibility. You bite me? Congratulations. Now every reckless move I make reflects on you. The chamber stirred, Kareth whispering in disbelief, some laughing nervously, others bristling. Vara hesitated. She had expected fear. She had not expected a counterclaim. You bind me? She demanded. Looks that way, Hale said cheerfully. Don't worry, I'm low maintenance. Just the occasional coffee and some good company. He winked. The Packlord's jaw tightened. Bold words. But words do not shift the hunt. True, Hale said. His gaze swept the hall, lingering on hidden guard weapons, the faint shimmer of cloaked drones along the ceiling. But hunts do shift when the prey stops running. For the first time, the Kareth weren't sure who was predator and who was prey. Closing the scene. Vara's fangs still gleamed, blood still marked Hale's neck, but the power dynamic had shifted like tectonic plates grinding underfoot. He adjusted his collar casually, as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than an awkward dinner date. Well, he said lightly, glad we cleared that up. Now, how about we talk business before somebody else gets bitey? The chamber bristled with tension. Somewhere in the rafters, a cloaked alien drone whined softly as its sensors recalibrated, watching the human who had just rewritten a sacred rite with nothing but charm, sarcasm, and the kind of confidence only an apex predator could fake without breaking. And yet, behind that polite smile, Jonathan Hale's mind was already working several moves ahead. This wasn't just diplomacy. This was the opening gambit of a trap that would ripple through the galaxy. The moment stretched far too long for the gathered aliens. To them, the scene unfolding looked less like diplomacy and more like an ancient ritual. The human stood still, posture relaxed, while the lupin alien pressed her fangs into his neck, not deep enough to draw blood, but enough to leave a mark. For the pack, it was a proclamation. For everyone else, it was bewilderment. The human didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head, as if he just remembered he'd left the oven on back home. Did she just claim him? Kissed the scaled officer of the Vecrii Empire, his forked tongue flicking nervously. Impossible. No prey would stand still for such humiliation, muttered Rultar diplomat, their insectoid mandibles clacking in agitation. Only the human smiled faintly, lips quirking as if he'd heard an inside joke. His tone, when he finally spoke, was maddeningly polite. Well, he said, brushing his collar back into place. That was unexpected. Should I buy her dinner first, or is that after the branding? A ripple of uneasy laughter broke out among the humans observing from the sidelines. None of the aliens laughed. Shifting power. Among the Lupak's pack, silence reigned. Their leader, High Fong Sarek, narrowed his eyes. He'd expected the human to either panic or resist, proving their species' weakness. Instead, the man seemed entirely unbothered, as if being claimed by a predator was just another Wednesday inconvenience. You mock our customs? Sarek growled, voice rumbling low like distant thunder. Not at all, the human replied smoothly, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. I respect tradition. But where I'm from, a gesture like that tends to come with commitments. You know, rings, ceremonies, a dance floor, maybe a little Sinatra. The name Sinatra rolled out of his mouth with casual weight. None of the aliens knew who that was, but the confidence with which he spoke left them unsettled. The young female who had marked him, Lyra, daughter of Sarek, stepped back. Her tail flicked nervously, as though she herself hadn't anticipated the human's calm acceptance. He hadn't snarled, hadn't fought, hadn't even raised his voice. It was wrong. It was dangerous. Sarek saw it too. You should fear us, human, he said, baring his fangs. We are hunters born. Your kind is soft, slow, tethered to fragile bones. A fawn mark should have broken you. The human clasped his hands behind his back, posture unshaken. Soft? Slow? Fragile? His voice dipped into something that wasn't humor anymore, still polite, but edged with steel. Funny. I was taught that wolves only claim what they're certain they can keep. The words landed like blades. The pack stirred uneasily, ears flicking, claws flexing. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. No bluster. No volume. Just certainty. Watching eyes. In the viewing galleries above, dozens of alien envoys whispered among themselves. He allows dominance displays without resistance, yet speaks as if he controls the exchange. He does not break under threat. That is unnatural. What if the humans do not perceive danger the way we do? The notion spread like fire. For species across the galaxy, survival was dictated by instinct, fear, fight, or flight. But these humans seemed to carry none of the proper cues. Their calmness was unnerving. Worse, it was calculated. Ambassador Drex of the Avlith, a species known for wisdom and patience, folded his wings and leaned forward. "Mark this moment," he whispered to his aide. "The humans are not what we assumed. This is a predator's stillness." Quiet defiance. Sarek advanced, towering over the human. His fur bristled, breath hot, fangs gleaming inches from the man's face. "Tell me your name," he demanded, "so I may carve it into my memory before I break you." The human smiled politely. "Name's Jack." Jack. A word so plain, so short, so unimpressive. Yet when he said it, the syllable carried weight. The kind of weight that made the fur along Lyra's spine stand on end. "Jack," Sarek repeated, savoring the sound. "You dare mock us with ease. Why?" Jack tilted his head as though genuinely puzzled. "Why? Because fear wastes energy. And where I come from, you don't waste what you'll need later." His eyes gleamed, not with humor this time, but with something darker. "Besides, you really don't want to know what it looks like when humans decide to be afraid." Lyra's ears pinned back. She had marked him in arrogance, thinking he would submit. But standing this close, she felt something wrong. He wasn't prey. He was waiting. The fracture. The chamber shifted into chaos when a rival alien delegation, sleek reptilian envoys of the Vekrii, snapped their jaws in derision. "Your pack claims scraps," one hissed toward Sarek. "Even your ownership rituals fall flat when the prey refuses fear. What a hollow spectacle." Sarek snarled, rounding on them, but Jack cleared his throat gently. The sound was soft. Courteous. Yet somehow it silenced the room. "Careful," Jack said pleasantly. "Mock the bite all you want, but you might want to think about the hand holding the leash." The Vekrii faltered. For a heartbeat, they looked at the human, then at Sarek, then back at the human again. The implications sank deep. Perhaps this wasn't Sarek's claim at all. Perhaps the human allowed it. A ripple of uncertainty spread through the hall. In predator societies, permission was power. And Jack, with his quiet humor and polite cadence, had just flipped the dynamic. Private tension. Later, when the hall cleared, Lyra cornered him in the shadowed corridors. Her voice was low, uncertain. "Why didn't you resist me?" Jack's smile softened, but his eyes didn't. "Because resistance would have given you what you wanted, a fight to prove your dominance. But by not resisting, I made you wonder why I didn't. And that's worse, isn't it?" Lyra bristled. "You think you can outwit my kind with words?" "I don't think," Jack said calmly. "I know. Wolves understand instinct. Humans understand patience. That's why your mark doesn't scare me. It amuses me." She bared her fangs, torn between anger and fascination. The mark was supposed to silence him, chain him, brand him. Instead, it had become his weapon. Echoes. Words spread quickly across the station. The human had been claimed, and yet, somehow, it was the alien pack now acting uncertain, unsettled, divided. Other delegations whispered about humanity with fresh caution. "They do not bend," one alien said. "They let themselves be marked, but it is the rest of us who feel owned," said another. Jack walked the halls quietly, hands in his pockets, smile easy. But everywhere he went, whispers followed. The fang mark still glistened faintly against his skin, yet it was no symbol of subjugation. It was a banner. A warning. The claim had echoed through the pack, but the echo was changing, twisting, growing louder. It wasn't just the wolves who had heard it. The galaxy had. And for the first time, they wondered, who had truly claimed whom? The council chamber looked less like a seat of galactic diplomacy, and more like a theater where everyone waited for the villain to reveal themselves. Only, the aliens still weren't sure if the human was the villain, or the fool. Captain Elias sat cross-legged on the floor instead of the hovering chair provided. His boots tapped against polished stone, hands folded behind his head as if he were lounging on a front porch. The Clithian delegation, insected diplomats with crystalline mandibles, stared at him in rigid horror. To them, such posture was disrespectful. To Elias, it was comfortable. "You seem relaxed?" rasped Counselor Krill, antennae clicking in agitation. "Comfort," Elias replied with a grin, "is underrated in politics. Sit too stiff, you forget you're human. Or Clithian in your case." He leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Besides, I've found people say more when they think I'm not paying attention." Krill's wings trembled. Across the chamber, the wolf-like Veer pack eyed the human with predatory curiosity. Their leader, Lorik, tilted his head. "You speak like prey pretending at teeth." Elias chuckled, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. "Funny thing about pretending, Lorik, it works until the bite lands." The chamber froze. The polite threat slithered through the air, soft yet sharp, impossible to ignore. Shifting tides. The debate had been meant to settle territorial claims. The Veer argued they had rights to the fringe systems. The Clithians contested. The humans, newcomers by galactic standards, were supposed to play mediator. But somehow Elias had shifted from observer to center stage. He sipped from a metal flask, offering no explanation. Every motion was calculated laziness, a theater of ease concealing the fact his eyes never stopped moving, measuring distances, exits, reactions. One of the smaller delegates, a Quarren scholar with translucent skin and pulsing veins, finally spoke. "Human, you display irreverence toward the council. Why?" Elias leaned back against the wall, expression softening. "Because reverence is a leash. Where I'm from, we learned early. You put a leash on the wrong beast, it'll drag you straight into the fire." Some snickered. Others shifted uncomfortably. The scholar pressed. "And which beast are you in this metaphor, Captain?" "Oh, me?" Elias's smile returned, faint and disarming. "I'm the guy holding the matches." A dangerous banter. The Veer erupted in low growls. The Clithians twitched nervously. Only the Quarren scholar stared, fascination outweighing fear. Lorik's fangs glinted. "You would burn the galaxy to prove a point?" "Depends on the point," Elias replied smoothly. "But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Today's about boundaries. And funny enough, I've got a story about boundaries." He stood, finally using the chair, not to sit, but to perch on its back like a crow on a branch. "Back on Earth, some neighbors argued over fences. One said the fence was too far in, the other said too far out. They fought for years. Lawyers, guns, dogs, you name it. Then one day, the fence vanished. Turned out both sides had been fighting over land that belonged to either of them." The aliens blinked, uncomprehending. Elias spread his hands. "Moral of the story? Sometimes the ground you're tearing each other apart for doesn't even belong to you. Sometimes it belongs to something bigger." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was suspicion. The word bigger carried weight no translator could soften. Unmasking intent. Counselor Krill clattered his mandibles. "You imply humanity has claim over these systems?" Elias gave a half shrug. "Not claim. Custody. We've been caretakers in our own way." His tone shifted, the warmth draining from his voice like sunlight slipping behind clouds. "And caretakers get twitchy when wolves and insects start tearing up the garden." That single word, caretakers, hung heavier than any weapon. The Quarren's skin pulsed violet. "You speak as though humanity waited for this moment. As though this was all planned." Elias locked eyes with the scholar. The grin vanished, replaced by a calm so absolute it was unsettling. "Planned? No. Prepared? Always. A shiver rolled through the chamber. For the first time, the aliens glimpsed the predator beneath the smile. Testing the pack. The Veer leader rose to his full towering height, muscles rippling under silver fur. I should test your words with blood, Lorik growled, voice low. Elias didn't flinch. He extended his wrist, baring pale skin. Go on, then. The room gasped. Lorik hesitated, hackles rising. Every instinct screamed it was a trap, but pride demanded he act. Slowly, he leaned in, fangs brushing the human skin. Just a graze, enough to draw a bead of crimson. Elias didn't move. Didn't blink. The only sound was the faint drip of blood against the polished stone. Then, with perfect timing, Elias whispered, Congratulations. You've just marked yourself mine. The words detonated louder than any explosion. Their culture was built on ritual claims, the act of tasting blood-bound challenger, and challenged in ways older than memory. To bite was to submit. Lorik recoiled, snarling, but the law of his people bound him. The other Veers shifted uneasily. Their leader had not dominated the human. He had been bound by him. Elias wiped the blood with a handkerchief, folded it neatly, and tucked it away. See? Boundaries can be complicated. The echo. Shock rippled across the chamber. The Clithians clicked furiously in confusion. The Quarren scribbled frantic notes. And the Veer lowered their eyes. Elias straightened, voice carrying now with the weight of command. Humans don't seek thrones, or empires, or shrines. We seek balance. But push us past our patience, and we don't just bite back. We claim. The air vibrated with the echo of his words. Claim. It wasn't just about land or stars. It was a declaration of intent, a line in the sand. The aliens felt it in their bones. Humanity had not come begging for a seat at the table. Humanity had come to flip the table when the time was right. Quiet after the storm. No one spoke for a long moment. Even Lorik, chest heaving, lowered his gaze. Finally, Elias slipped his flask back into his coat and smiled again, softer this time. Well, that got heavier than intended. Someone passed the snacks, yeah? I make better speeches when I'm chewing. The chamber, taut with dread, didn't move. Elias leaned back, stretching as if he'd just finished a casual workout. All right, no snacks. Shame. Guess we'll just have to move on to business. And with that, the storm he had conjured settled into a fragile, trembling calm, one that promised far darker tempests yet to come. The chamber doors shut with a hollow clang that echoed through the stone-carved walls of the alien citadel. The air carried a faint metallic tang, mingling with the musk of foreign incense. Kieran stood at the center of the arena-like hall, his posture calm, though every eye on him weighed like a blade at his throat. He was surrounded, not by soldiers, not by assassins, but by something far more dangerous: politics, envy, and instinct. The alien court sat in tiers. At the highest seat, draped in silks the color of blood, lounged the matron. Her feline features were sharp, eyes glowing like twin embers, and her gaze never once shifted from him. Beside her, young nobles whispered, tails twitching, pupils narrowing whenever they glanced toward him. He was the anomaly, the human, the interloper. And in their society, an unclaimed male was a contested prize. Kieran broke the silence with a tone polite, almost teasing. Interesting welcome. Do you always summon guests by slamming doors behind them, or is that just for me? The ripple of low growls and hisses from the crowd was instantaneous. To mock the matron's authority was unthinkable. Yet she did not stir. Her claws traced lazily along the armrest of her throne. Instead of outrage, she gave him a smile that was all fangs. You provoke, human. Is it defiance, or do you wish to test who here is bold enough to answer you? Neither, he replied smoothly. I just prefer a door left open. Easier to leave, if the company becomes unkind. That earned a sharp laugh from one of the younger females in the tier below. But the mirth vanished the moment the matron flicked her gaze toward her. Silence reclaimed the hall. It was then that the scent hit him again. Subtle, sharp, unmistakable. From the corner of the chamber, a figure stepped forward, her posture radiating confidence. Tall, fur shimmering like molten bronze under the torchlight, her eyes locked onto him with a hunter's certainty. She moved with deliberate grace, not fast but impossible to ignore. Each stride was a declaration. The crowd shifted, whispers rushing like wildfire. Kieran tensed, though outwardly he appeared relaxed. He remembered her from the skirmish outside the city, the warrior who had dragged him clear when the enemy's net cannons had fired. She had not asked permission. She had acted, claimed, and now here she was again, stepping closer with that same relentless certainty. When she reached him, she paused only a breath away. Then, without warning, she brushed against him. Her shoulder met his arm, her head dipped, and she exhaled, soft, heated, pressing her cheek against his neck. The scent intensified. She wasn't just marking him, she was declaring him hers in the most public way possible. The hall gasped as one. Kieran froze, not from fear but calculation. He had read enough of their customs to know exactly what this meant. A public scent marking wasn't a gesture of affection. It was a battle cry, a signal to every female present, "This one belongs to me. Approach him at your peril." He leaned slightly, whispering so only she could hear. "Bold move. Didn't think we'd skipped straight to branding." Her ears flicked, but her voice was firm, low, and tinged with amusement. "Not branding. Protecting. You walk in unclaimed, you invite blood. Now they'll think twice. Or they'll come for you instead," he murmured. Her smile was sharp. "Let them." The matron finally rose, the weight of her authority crashing down like a storm. Her robe trailed across the steps as she descended. The crowd parted in silence, heads bowed. But her eyes never left Kieran, and the warrior now standing at his side. "So," the matron purred, "you would dare claim a human Asha?" The name struck like a whip. The warrior, Asha, stood taller, defiant but respectful. "I dare nothing, matron. I act as instinct demands." "Instinct," the matron repeated, tasting the word. She circled them, her claws tapping against stone, each step deliberate. "You sent Mark a mail before witnesses. That is more than instinct. That is a challenge. You know what this will bring." "I know," Asha said calmly. "And I accept it." Kieran kept his face unreadable, though his mind churned. He had walked into a political nest, and now Asha had dragged him into the center of it. If he rejected her, he would insult her before the court, and mark himself as weak prey. If he embraced it, even silently, he became a pawn in whatever power struggle unfolded. Either way, the room brimmed with tension thick enough to choke. The matron leaned close to him, her voice velvet and venom. "And what of you, human? Do you consent to be claimed? Or will you insult her courage before us all?" Every eye locked onto him again. The alien court waited, eager to tear apart his answer. Kieran tilted his head slightly, feigning thought while buying time. Then, with a faint smile, he spoke. "Consent? That's a very human word. Where I'm from, claims aren't one-sided. If she wants me marked as hers, then she accepts I might mark her as mine." The silence that followed was electric. A dozen tails lashed in agitation, ears flattened, and growls simmered low. To reverse the claim, turning it mutual, was unheard of. It wasn't just bold. It was scandalous. The matron's lips curved, revealing gleaming teeth. "You speak as if you have teeth in this game, human." "Oh," Kieran said softly, his gaze unwavering. "I have teeth. I just don't bare them unless I must." Asha's ears twitched, surprise flickering across her usually composed face. Then, slowly, she gave the faintest nod, acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. The matron circled back to her throne, amusement burning in her eyes. "Very well. The claim stands. Let us see if either of you survives the weight it carries." The audience erupted in whispers, tension rippling outward like waves from a stone cast into water. Rivalries were born in that instant. Plots began to form. Somewhere in the shadows, envious eyes narrowed, already scheming. Kieran glanced sideways at Asha. "You realize you've just painted a target on both our backs?" Her expression was unshaken, her voice calm as steel. Better a target than unclaimed prey. He exhaled slowly, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Guess we're partners now. Just hope you're as good at keeping me alive as you are at making declarations. Try me, she said, her tail flicking with restrained energy. And as the court descended into murmured chaos, Kieran understood one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever game had begun, it was far larger than just survival. This wasn't only about instinct or protection. It was about power. And now, like it or not, he was in the very center of it.